Ever wondered what it takes to reshape the world with beauty, grit, and unstoppable generosity? Dive into the extraordinary story of Bunny Mellon, a woman whose passion for art, gardens, and giving made her a true legend. From designing iconic landscapes to curating masterpieces that still captivate millions, Bunny didn't just live through a century of history, she defined it. Curious how she blended old money elegance with a heart for the greater good, or how she faced heartbreak and betrayal without ever losing her spark? In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on Bunny Mellon's life, packed with dazzling creations, high-stakes horse races, and quiet acts of kindness that change the world. Expect jaw-dropping tales, from White House gardens to Parisian estates and a legacy that's still blooming today. Whether you're a fan of history, art, or just love a story of resilience, Bunny's journey is one you won't want to miss. Hit that play button and let's uncover the secrets of Bunny Mellon, who made the world more beautiful. One rose, one painting, one dream at a time. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more epic stories. On August 9th, 1910, dawn broke over Princeton with the quiet grace of a silk curtain rising on an intimate stage. Into that tender light was born Rachel Lowe Lambert, soon to be known almost exclusively by the nickname Bunny, a playful moniker that danced ahead of her, as if fate preferred charm over formality. Her first cradle rested within a mansion that transcended a mere address, embodying the legacy of a dynasty, the Lamberts, holders of patents, corporate empires, and a confidence so ingrained it seemed carved into the mahogany walls. Her father, Gerard Barnes Lambert, led Gillette Safety Razor, transforming daily grooming into a steady revenue stream. Her grandfather, Jordan Wheat Lambert, had concocted Listerine before mouthwash became a household staple. This alchemy of wealth and innovation positioned Bunny at the nexus of finance, marketing, and what would later be termed brand culture, though she was still too young to wield a toothbrush, let alone chair a board meeting. The home where Bunny learned to crawl carried the faint scent of fresh-cut grass and inked contracts. Marble corridors opened onto gardens, designed more as maps of delight than plots of necessity. Each rose trellis whispered of heritage. Each manicured hedge traced a letter in the alphabet of old money decorum. Yet the marvel of Bunny's early years was that she greeted this privilege not with arrogance, but with a curiosity so vivid it outshone the chandeliers. She would study a dew-laden daisy, lift a petal as if turning a page, and seem to decipher secrets in its symmetry. Adults mistook her silence for shyness, but within her mind, a greenhouse of questions was already steaming the glass. Gerard's work carved deep grooves into the family's rhythm. Trains to New York, telegrams from Chicago, and boardroom negotiations that stretched dusk into bourbon-hued midnight defined his tempo. Bunny's mother, Rachel Lowe, provided a softer counterpoint. Chopinitudes echoing in the parlor, watercolor palettes strewn across a breakfast tray, gentle nudges to notice how a shadow was never merely gray, but a blend of blues and mauves. She taught no formal botany lessons, yet instilled that beauty could instruct like algebra and nourish like oatmeal. When society compensated for a father's absence with ponies and pearls, Bunny found deeper value in her mother's subtle art of adjusting a vase until the iris stems crossed like a ballerina's ankles. Princeton itself served as an unofficial mentor. On Nassau Street, a symphony of academic chatter, cafe steam, and chapel bells formed a constant backdrop. The Lambert chauffeur would glide the limousine past the university's stone-clad buildings, and Bunny, her nose barely cresting the window, wondered why vines clung to Gothic walls in such deliberate diagonals. She sensed that architecture and flora were dance partners, though neither admitted it. Later, she would name this intuition proportion. For now it was a mysterious pulse, syncing with her heartbeat as she roamed the family estate. One of her earliest vivid memories was trailing a gardener at dawn. To her, he was nameless, just a pair of weathered hands pruning faded blooms. She was 5, barefoot on damp grass, silent to avoid startling the robins. When he removed his cap to wipe sweat, she noticed a pale band of skin beneath the brim, like a mark bestowed by the sun. At breakfast, between spoonfuls of porridge, she asked her mother if gardens left traces on people, as people left traces on gardens. Rachel paused, then replied, "Yes, dear, that's exactly how it works." It was philosophy cloaked as comfort, and the idea took root so deeply that Bunny never doubted that landscapes and lives co-write each other's stories. Her education unfolded in layers. First came Miss Fine's school, where the curriculum seemed crafted by someone who equated embroidery stitches with Latin conjugations and civic value. Petite and bookish, Bunny found Latin verbs tedious but relished how their endings shifted like puzzles. She sensed a language so pliable might one day help her shape flower beds into poetry. She was adept with a tennis racket, but her true dexterity shone in the quiet persistence of flipping journal pages. To shield a sketch from a classmate's gaze, she guarded her drawings as some girls guarded love letters, for those secret outlines of leaves and trellises held more emotional weight than any note from a neighbor's son. Private tutors enriched her artistic palette. A French émigré insisted she memorize Colette's prose. An art historian from the Louvre taught her to seek negative space as eagerly as objects. A visiting landscape painter introduced her to a stereoscope, 2 images merging into one, and remarked, "Depth is a trick of perspective." That phrase became a lasting echo. She began exploring depth everywhere, layering tulips behind yews so spring colors exploded like confetti from the porch, or arranging still life displays in her bedroom window so twilight could slip through water-filled jars and cast prismatic stripes across her pillow. Family vacations doubled as master classes. In France, Rachel guided her through the orangerie, where Monet's water lily panels seemed to float frameless. They picnicked beneath chateaux, and Bunny's sketchbook brimmed with hurried renderings, parterre patterns seen from second-story balconies, alley paths that tricked the eye into believing infinity lay just beyond the final lime tree. At Giverny, watching gardeners deadhead wilted lilies, she realized beauty was not a static triumph, but a process of constant editing. Snip here, trim there, pause, reassess. Back in her hotel room, she applied that principle to her handwriting, striking out excessive loops, seeking a script as balanced as a formal garden's layout. The Lambert marriage, however, lacked such disciplined pruning. Financial vines flourished, but emotional decay set in at the roots. Business absences grew into unbridgeable gulfs, misunderstandings solidified into quarrels. By Bunny's teens, the word divorce loomed like a cloud awaiting a pressure drop. She noticed glances at dinner, her mother's voice tightening, her father ordering a second cocktail before the soup. When the divorce was finalized in 1933, amid the Great Depression, reporters sharpened their pencils, eager to sketch another tale of wealthy ruin. Bunny faced the flashbulbs and learned the power of composure, offer nothing to sensationalize. She emerged from courthouses with a calm that disarmed gossip, though inwardly she was rearranging loyalties like a gardener transplanting bulbs after frost. Gerard remarried with corporate efficiency, Rachel with bohemian flair. One home became two sets of holiday traditions assembled like mismatched puzzles. Bunny, ever observant, noted how each household arranged its table centerpieces. Her father's new wife favored rigid crystal displays. Her mother's new husband tolerated forsythia sprays that spilled over lace. To Bunny, those vases symbolized opposing philosophies of control versus freedom. She concluded that taste was a form of moral architecture and quietly aligned with the side that let branches curve as they wished. Shyness might have isolated another child, but Bunny's resilience thrived on solitude, like ivy on brick. She retreated to Foxcroft's greenhouse between algebra and literature, coaxing orchids back from Virginia's humidity. She learned that orchids, like people, crave attention but resent fuss. She scribbled aphorisms beside watering schedules. Overwatering kills more dreams than drought. At night, beneath mosquito netting, she journaled, her entries reading less like diaries and more like design manifestos masked as bedtime thoughts. She mused that heartache's geometry could be mapped by treating emotions as garden quadrants. Set boundaries, add paths, leave space for something unexpected to bloom in the center. Her social calendar inevitably filled with debutante duties. Silk gloves, curtsies practiced before full-length mirrors, dance cards dangling from tasseled cords. Though courteous, Bunny found such rituals ornamental in the hollow sense. She preferred inspecting the floral arrangements at ballroom entrances. Were the lilies wilting in the heat? Were stems cut diagonally? She kept mental tallies, predicting which blooms would fade before dessert. In her mind, a vow took shape. If she ever hosted a gala, her flowers would endure until dawn. Proof that hospitality and horticulture share a backbone. American history swirled at her periphery. Jazz records crackled in college dorms. Women's suffrage marked its 10th year. Wall Street's crash echoed even in mansions with private zip codes. Bunny processed these through a lens of color and form, not policy. A stock market graph resembled espaliered branches pinned to a wall. Bread lines in news photos looked like displaced human hedgerows. These visual metaphors didn't diminish tragedy. They gave her a language to engage it without breaching her social reserve. At 15, she experienced a private epiphany she never voiced. Wandering the estate after rain, she saw spider silk flashing tiny rainbows in the early sun. That prism resonated within her, and she understood why she drew, why she reimagined flower beds, why she could trace leaf veins for hours. The world held designs wiser than any headline, and she felt born to translate them into spaces where people could reclaim their less cynical selves. She returned home drenched but radiant, her nurse mistaking her glow for fever. In truth, she had found her calling. The next year, a French tutor assigned a comparative essay on Versailles and Vaux-le-Vicomte. Bunny's pages burst with sensory detail, fountain spray as liquid sculpture, gravel paths crunching like polite applause. She taped watercolor thumbnails of each terrace in the margins. The tutor returned it with one comment. Vous êtes architecte du silence. You are an architect of silence. Bunny cherished the phrase, for it captured her gift, crafting spaces where quiet meant possibility, not emptiness. Foxcroft's riding program channeled her competitive spirit. A stablemate teased her for fussing over flower beds instead of flirting. Rather than argue, she challenged him to a dawn steeplechase on a rain-slick course. He accepted, assuming her reserve signaled weakness. Mud flew, hooves thundered, and she won by 3 lengths, laughing so hard she nearly fell from the saddle. The victory crystallized a truth as tangible as sore muscles. Gentleness and ferocity could coexist without contradiction. Later, when men in politics or finance tested her resolve, she responded with polite smiles and unyielding choices that echoed that race, though they never knew the story. Europe called again the summer she turned 17. She and her mother attended salons where French designers debated whether geometry tamed or freed nature. Bunny listened, concluding the answer lay in choreography. Let nature set the rhythm, geometry the steps. At night, on balconies above the scene, she mapped constellations, noting how Orion's belt mirrored the triangles of clipped U's she'd admired earlier. Her mind wove sky and garden into an endless diagram. Back in America, the 1929 crash spared the Lamberts wealth more than most, thanks to the recession-proof demand for razors and mouthwash. Yet newspaper images of Dust Bowl breadlines clashed so starkly with her abundance that they sparked a restlessness to make beauty serve beyond flattery. She sketched public parks with hedges forming open rooms for reflection, imagining city rose gardens free of entry fees. These were youthful blueprints, but they foreshadowed the philanthropic gardens she would fund in her 80s, offering green havens to those who could never afford Versailles. By 19, she carried a Kodak Brownie everywhere, capturing branch structures for reference. She harbored no illusions of being a photographer. She simply knew memory fades and light is fleeting. Her dorm room darkened with developing negatives, and when friends asked why she smelled of fixative, she quipped that a little stench was the price of archiving paradise. The divorce's aftershocks shaped her social instincts. She mastered small talk that revealed nothing. At galas, reporters probed about her parents' settlement or inheritance. She answered with measured grace, redirecting to horticultural trivia. Did you know white roses turn ivory in city air? Until their notepads filled with harmless quotes. This honed her ability to deflect attention, a skill vital when she later hosted heads of state without letting her presence overshadow the occasion. As her 20th birthday neared, romance entered tea-time conversations. Suitors arrived, a Vanderbilt cousin, a Morgan banker's nephew, an English baronet with an ironed accent. They offered bouquets from elite florists who prized symmetry above all. She accepted but mentally rearranged each bloom. At a garden party, one boasted of shooting 7 ducks in a morning hunt. Bunny asked if he'd noticed the dawn light outlining the reeds. He blinked, baffled, and she knew he'd never grasp her compass. She began to suspect she was already wed to soil, shadow, and the unseen geometry of wind. Still, companionship held allure. On a winter trail ride, a young man, Stacy Barcroft Lloyd Jr., offered his scarf when hers fell into the snow. He praised her horse before her profile, which felt genuine. He asked if she knew the names of nearby trees. She listed Latin names, surprised he listened rather than waited to speak. Romance budded, but that courtship's tale lies beyond childhood. For now, let it linger like mist rising from a garden after rain. In her final adolescent months, she quietly rebelled against debutante docility. She concluded that managing a garden was managing time, and to manage time, one must own it. So she embarked on secret field trips to Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where Japanese maples glowed like embers, to Central Park's Ramble, where wildness met urban grid, to the Bronx riverbanks, where invasive knotweed choked natives, showing neglect's distinct signature. She traveled incognito, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her face, a sketchbook tucked in a thrift store satchel no society photographer would notice. One late March afternoon, strolling Union Square Green Market alone, she overheard a farmer explain loam composition to a curious buyer, describing pH and earthworms like a jazz ensemble. Bunny waited, then bought a bag of his soil. Not produce, just soil. Back at her boarding house, she spread it on newspaper like gold dust, identifying pebbles, organic bits, and mica's faint shimmer. It was like reading a foreign letter, catching every third word. She vowed fluency. Library nights turned into research marathons. She devoured Gertrude Jekyll's treatises, Capability Brown's engravings, Humphrey Repton's red books, reverse engineering their plans to grasp how sightlines shaped emotion. While the world invented radio soaps and plastic toothbrushes, Bunny's obsession spanned centuries, seeking universal laws in leaf shapes and shadow angles. She dreamed in top-down diagrams, lawns flanked by bosquets, crescent herb beds circling an orangery, sight lines aimed at distant steeples. She'd wake, jot the dream, sleep, and dream the path materials, crushed oyster shell, herringbone brick, decomposed granite. At graduation, her mother found her on the greenhouse floor at dawn, arranging pansy seedlings into a sunrise-like gradient. Rachel, ever perceptive, read her daughter's silence as dread. Formal education done, life demanded new chapters. She brushed soil from Bunny's sleeves and said, "Whatever you design, remember who you're designing for." The words puzzled Bunny, who thought gardens were for all. Years later, overseeing the White House rose garden, she'd realized her mother meant empathy. Landscape architecture must translate a client's unspoken hopes into tangible form. On the summer solstice post-graduation, she hosted a small Foxcroft classmate gathering. Instead of finger sandwiches, she curated an outdoor tasting menu, each course paired with a scent. Wild strawberry tartlets beside fragrant alpine strawberry pots, lemon syllabub with crushed verbena, coffee with tuberose blooms opening at dusk. Guests called the evening enchanted, but Bunny delighted most in their newfound attention to sensory memory, naming scents they'd ignored all semester. She realized she could guide perception like a conductor builds to a crescendo, thrilling her more than applause. Her father, noting her horticultural seriousness, offered to fund study at any European academy. She declined, feeling institutions gave answers before teaching questions. She craved apprenticeship, hands in dirt, failures composting into lessons. She sought an elderly gardener, rumored to have tended a New Jersey estate for 50 years. He agreed to mentor her, provided she started at the bottom, literally. That first week, she scrubbed moss from terracotta pots, hauled manure, sharpened shears, and patched wheelbarrow wheels. By Friday, her nails bore dirt crescents. Her muscles quivered like saplings in wind. She loved it. His teaching was exacting. "Every plant speaks a dialect," he said. "Learn it, or you're just a tourist." He showed her how to read stress in a rose by its thorns angle, diagnose nutrient lack by a tomato leaf's precise yellow, prune for shape without harming next year's blooms. She logged each lesson in a journal tucked under her belt, its pages thickened with field grit. Once, catching her sketching instead of raking, he asked, "What do drawings teach that doing can't?" She replied, "They teach me to think before my hands think for me." He grunted, half grudging, half approving. By her 21st birthday, Bunny held knowledge no textbook offered. How bark darkens before dawn, how root flare betrays planting errors, how fragrance travels differently in humid versus dry nights. She fused this practical rigor with aesthetic finesse from Paris salons, creating a rare synthesis, scientist and poet of space. Friends and relatives sought her advice, climbing roses for shady corners, tulips with Greek statues. She hesitated, feeling unqualified, until her mentor corrected her. "You've earned more authority than many professionals." She believed him quietly, as moonlight trusts its glow without shouting at the dark. In 1932, right in the heart of the Great Depression, though you wouldn't know it from the scene at Trinity Church in Princeton, New Jersey. On November 25th, the pews are packed, the air's buzzing with excitement, and all eyes are on a radiant bride walking down the aisle. She's tying the knot with Stacy Barcroft Lloyd Jr., a guy who's practically the definition of East Coast elite. Stacy's from Ardmore, Pennsylvania, born into a family with deep pockets and deeper roots. Think old money, big estates, the whole deal. He's not just a trust fund kid, though. He's a businessman with a sharp mind, a guy who's as comfortable closing deals as he is sailing a yacht across the Atlantic. Oh, and horses? The man's obsessed. He's got that passion for thoroughbreds that runs through the veins of the American aristocracy, spending his days breeding champions and chasing the thrill of the racetrack. The wedding's a big moment, not just for the couple, but for the society pages that can't get enough of this glamorous pair. They settle into married life, and soon enough they're building a family. First comes Stacy Barcroft Lloyd III, a boy who grows up with his father's charm and a knack for finding beauty in the past. He becomes a collector of antiques, the kind of guy who can spot a 17th century silver candlestick in a dusty shop and know its entire history. Then there's Eliza Wynne Lloyd, their daughter, who's got an artist's soul. She dives headfirst into the world of creativity, painting, sculpting, chasing her muse wherever it leads. Now, life with Stacy isn't all smooth sailing. The 1930s are tough for everyone, and even a couple like this feels the strain. But it's the 1940s that really shake things up. World War II is raging, and Stacy's not the type to sit on the sidelines. He signs up with the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, which is basically the spy agency before the CIA was even a thing. He's out there doing covert ops, gathering intel, maybe even dodging bullets, who knows? The guy's living a real-life James Bond adventure while his wife holds down the fort at home, raising their kids and keeping the family's world spinning. It's a lot to handle, and maybe the war, the distance, or just the weight of it all starts to crack the foundation of their marriage. By 1948, after 16 years together, they call it quits. The divorce is amicable as these things go, but it's still a turning point. She's closing one chapter and stepping into a new one, ready for whatever comes next. And what comes next? Oh, it's a game changer. Enter Paul Mellon, a man who's about to become the love of her life and her partner in every sense of the word. Paul's no stranger to Stacy. He's a war buddy from the OSS days, someone who's seen the same gritty, high-stakes world. But Paul's not just any guy. He's the son of Andrew W. Mellon, one of the richest men in America, a banking titan who served as U.S. Treasury Secretary and built a fortune that could make your head spin. Paul's inherited his dad's wealth, sure, but he's got his own vibe, thoughtful, cultured, and crazy about the same thing she is. Art, horses, gardens, giving back. He's her kind of people. The timing's a bit messy, though. Paul's coming off his own divorce, and his first wife has recently passed away, leaving him with a heavy heart and 2 kids to raise. But when he and our leading lady reconnect, it's like the stars align. They're both ready for something real, something lasting. On May 1st, 1948, they tie the knot, and let me tell you, this isn't just a marriage. It's a partnership that's going to redefine what a power couple looks like. From the moment they say I do, it's clear this is the real deal. They're in it for the long haul, and for the next 51 years, they build a life that's as beautiful as it is meaningful. So what's life like with Paul Mellon? Picture this: sprawling estates in Virginia and New York, where the lawns are manicured to perfection, and the stables are filled with thoroughbreds that could outrun the wind. They're not just rich, they're tasteful. Their homes are like museums packed with paintings by the greats. Think Renoir, Monet, maybe a Picasso or two. Paul's got this obsession with art, and she's right there with him, curating collections that could make a curator weep. They don't just collect for themselves, though. They're all about sharing the beauty. They pour millions into museums, like the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., which Paul's dad helped found. It's not about showing off. It's about making sure everyone gets a chance to stand in front of a masterpiece and feel something. Horses are another big part of their world. They're out at the racetrack cheering on their champions, or back at their farm watching foals take their first wobbly steps. Their stable Rokeby becomes a legend in the racing world, producing winners that make headlines and hearts race. It's not just about the trophies, though. There's something almost spiritual about the way they connect with these animals, the way they understand the rhythm of a gallop or the trust in a horse's eyes. It's a passion that binds them, a shared language they speak without words. Then there's the gardening. Oh man, their gardens are something else. We're talking roses that smell like heaven, hedges trimmed with surgical precision, and flower beds that look like they were painted by an artist. They spend hours out there, getting their hands dirty, planning new layouts, or just sitting with a glass of iced tea watching the bees do their thing. It's their sanctuary, a place where they can escape the world and just be. And trust me, with lives as big as theirs, that kind of peace is priceless. But what really sets this couple apart is their heart for giving back. Paul's got more money than most countries, and they could have spent it all on private jets and diamond tiaras, but that's not their style. They're philanthropists in the truest sense, funneling millions into causes that matter. Hospitals, schools, environmental projects, art programs, you name it. They're supporting it. They set up foundations like the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that keep giving long after they're gone. It's not about getting their names on buildings. It's about making the world a better place, one grant at a time. She's right there with Paul, strategizing, meeting with charities, making sure every dollar counts. It's exhausting work, but they love it. Because for them, wealth isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it. Life with Paul isn't without its challenges. They've got kids from their previous marriages to raise, and blending families is never easy. There's the occasional clash, the usual drama, but they handle it with the same grace they bring to everything else. They also live in a world where the spotlight's always, where every move is scrutinized by the press or the society crowd, but they don't let it faze them. They've got each other, and that's enough. Their marriage is a rock, nay, steady through the ups and downs, built on mutual respect and a love that only gets stronger with time. As the decades roll by, they watch the world change. The 1950s bring post-war optimism, the 60s bring revolution, the 70s bring disco and oil crises. Through it all, they're a constant, hosting elegant dinners, jetting to Europe for art auctions, or just kicking back at their farm, watching their horses graze. They're not stuck in the past, though. They embrace the new, whether it's modern art or new ways of giving. They're the kind of couple who can talk about a Van Gogh one minute and a cutting-edge environmental project the next, always curious, always engaged. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy called on Bunny to overhaul this historic space, and it was a challenge that would define her career. JFK had a clear vision. He wanted a garden that could serve as a backdrop for official events. Think state dinners, press conferences, and diplomatic receptions. But it needed to feel quintessentially American, with an elegance that could stand up to the world's scrutiny. Bunny didn't just meet the brief. She exceeded it in every way. She reimagined the garden's layout, opening up the space to make it more inviting and functional. Gone were the cluttered beds and outdated designs. In their place, she introduced clean lines, sweeping lawns, and a carefully curated selection of Native American plants, roses, magnolias, and crabapples that celebrated the country's natural heritage. She added a central lawn framed by flower beds, creating a stage that was both grand and intimate, perfect for everything from a president's speech to a quiet moment of reflection. The result was a garden that wasn't just beautiful, it was a symbol of American pride, a space that felt timeless yet forward looking. When you see photos of presidents addressing the nation from that garden, you're seeing Bunny's work still shaping history decades later. But her work at the White House didn't end there. After the tragic assassination of JFK in 1963, First Lady Lady Bird Johnson turned to Bunny to complete another project, the East Garden, a space envisioned by Jackie Kennedy as a counterpart to the Rose Garden. This was a deeply emotional task as the nation was still reeling from loss, and Bunny approached it with her signature blend of sensitivity and skill. Working closely with head gardener Irvin Williams, she crafted a garden that was both serene and stately, a place where beauty could offer solace. She incorporated soft, flowing plantings, azaleas, camellias, and flowering cherries that created a sense of calm while maintaining a formal structure that honored the White House's grandeur. The East Garden became a quiet retreat, a space where visitors could feel the weight of history, but also find a moment of peace. Bunny's ability to weave emotion into her designs was uncanny. She didn't just create landscapes, she created experiences that resonated on a human level. The Kennedy family, clearly impressed, kept Bunny close. She became their go-to designer for personal projects, starting with Jackie Kennedy's home on Martha's Vineyard. This wasn't a public stage like the White House. It was a private sanctuary, and Bunny approached it with the same care she'd give a dear friend. She designed a landscape that blended seamlessly with the island's rugged beauty, windswept grasses, low stone walls, and pockets of wildflowers that felt like they'd always been there. It was a place where Jackie could escape the spotlight and find peace, and Bunny's design made that possible. She also lent her talents to the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library in Boston, shaping the grounds to reflect the late president's legacy. Here she used simple, elegant plantings to frame the modernist architecture, creating a space that was both reverent and inviting, a fitting tribute to a man who'd inspired a generation. Bunny's influence extended beyond the Kennedys to other American institutions. Take River Farm, the headquarters of the American Horticultural Society in Virginia. When Bunny got her hands on it, she saw an opportunity to create something truly special, a living showcase of what gardening could achieve. She transformed the property into a vibrant mix of formal gardens, wild meadows, and educational plots, all designed to inspire visitors and demonstrate the power of horticulture. She included native plants to promote sustainability, added walking paths to encourage exploration, and even incorporated spaces for community events, making River Farm a place where anyone could connect with nature. It wasn't just a headquarters, it was a celebration of gardening's potential to bring people together, and Bunny's vision made it unforgettable. Her talents weren't bound by borders either. Across the Atlantic, Bunny collaborated with fashion legend Hubert de Givenchy at his estate in France. This wasn't just any garden, it was a reflection of Givenchy's impeccable taste, and Bunny matched it with her own. She designed a landscape that was as sophisticated as his couture, with manicured hedges, cascading roses, and hidden corners that invited quiet contemplation. Every element was deliberate, from the way the sunlight filtered through ancient oaks to the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. It was a garden that felt alive, elegant, and deeply personal, a testament to Bunny's ability to translate a client's essence into green. Then there was Versailles, the gold standard of historic gardens. When Bunny was invited to help restore its legendary grounds, she didn't hesitate. Working with a team of historians and gardeners, she breathed new life into spaces that had faded with time, meticulously reviving the parterres, fountains, and allées that had once dazzled kings. She studied original plans, consulted with French experts, and ensured every detail was authentic, from the choice of period-appropriate plants to the precise angles of the clipped boxwoods. Her work at Versailles wasn't just restoration, it was a love letter to history, ensuring that future generations could experience the grandeur of Lenot's vision. But if you want to know where Bunny's heart truly lived, look no further than Oak Spring Farms, her 4,000-acre estate in Virginia. This wasn't just a property. It was her laboratory, her canvas, her soul in bloom. Spanning rolling hills, woodlands, and meadows, Oak Spring was where Bunny let her creativity run wild. She experimented with new plant combinations, tested sustainable gardening techniques, and designed gardens that felt like extensions of her own spirit. There was a formal rose garden that rivaled anything in Europe, a wildflower meadow that danced with color, and a serene orchard that whispered of simpler times. Every corner of Oak Spring told a story, from the ancient oaks she preserved to the delicate ferns she nurtured in shaded groves. It was a place of endless discovery, where Bunny could push the boundaries of what a garden could be. Oak Spring was also home to the Oak Spring Garden Library, a monument to Bunny's lifelong love of knowledge. This wasn't just a collection of books, it was a treasure trove of rare manuscripts, botanical prints, and gardening texts, some dating back centuries. Bunny didn't just collect these works, she used them to deepen her understanding and share it with others. The library became a resource for scholars, gardeners, and anyone curious about the art of horticulture, housing everything from 17th century herbals to modern treatises on landscape design. Bunny's commitment to preserving this knowledge was unwavering. She saw it as her duty to ensure that the wisdom of the past would inspire the future. In 1966, her contributions to conservation and horticulture earned her the prestigious Conservation Service Award from the U.S. Department of the Interior, a recognition of a life dedicated to making the world more beautiful and sustainable. Now let's talk about Bunny's wealth, because her talents were matched by a fortune that was nothing short of staggering. Her net worth was estimated at around $1 billion, a sum built on the Lambert family's razor blade and mouthwash empire. Her father's leadership at Gillette and her grandfather's Listerine legacy gave her a head start. But Bunny wasn't content to coast on inheritance. She was a savvy investor, channeling her wealth into trusts and strategic ventures that grew her fortune over decades. She didn't flash her money around, though. Bunny was the opposite of ostentatious. She let her gardens, her philanthropy, and her quiet confidence speak for her, keeping her financial life as private as her personal one. Her real estate portfolio was a reflection of her taste and vision, a collection of properties that spanned continents and lifestyles. The centerpiece was Oak Spring Farms, a sprawling 4,000-acre estate in Virginia's horse country. This wasn't just a home, it was a world unto itself, complete with rolling pastures, historic barns, and a private airstrip for her Falcon 2000 jet. Imagine landing your plane in your own backyard. That was Bunny's reality. Then there was her 27-acre villa in Antigua, a tropical paradise of swaying palms and turquoise views, which she later listed for $14.5 million. Over the years, she owned other gems, a seaside retreat in Nantucket, a grand home in Oyster Harbors on Cape Cod, 2 elegant apartments in Paris, and a sophisticated townhouse in New York City. Each property was a canvas for her creativity, filled with gardens she designed and interiors she curated with her impeccable eye. Most of these homes were sold before her passing, but they tell the story of a woman who lived expansively, always with a purpose that went beyond mere ownership. Bunny's art and jewelry collections were just as breathtaking, a testament to her ability to find beauty in every form. Her jewelry, crafted by masters like Cartier and Verdura, was the kind of stuff that could steal your breath. Think diamond necklaces that sparkled like morning dew, or emerald brooches as vibrant as her gardens. Each piece was chosen with care, not for status but for its artistry, a reflection of Bunny's belief that beauty was worth celebrating in all its forms. Her art collection, built alongside her husband Paul Mellon, was even more extraordinary. Spanning thousands of works, it was a journey through the heights of human creativity, from 18th and 19th century European masterpieces to bold modern pieces. Imagine walking into her home and seeing Georges Seurat's The Lighthouse at Honfleur, its pointillist dots shimmering like sunlight on water, or Claude Monet's Woman with a Parasol, Madame Monet and her son, where the breeze seems to rustle the canvas, as alive as any meadow. There was Paul Cézanne's Boy in a Red Waistcoat, with its quiet intensity, and Mary Cassatt's Little Girl in a blue armchair, capturing the tender simplicity of childhood. George Stubbs' White Poodle in a Punt brought a touch of whimsy, while American artists like George Bellows with his gritty New York and Winslow Homer with the dinner horn blowing the horn at Seaside grounded the collection in the energy of the New World. And then there were the Mark Rothko paintings, Number 20, Yellow Expanse, and Untitled, Yellow, Light Orange. Their vast glowing fields of color evoking the same emotional depth as a sunset over Oak Spring. These weren't just artworks. They were conversations, emotions, and moments frozen in time, curated by a woman who understood beauty's power to move the soul. Bunny's approach to her collections was as private as it was profound. She rarely spoke to the press, deflecting questions about her wealth or her treasures, with the same grace she used to redirect a poorly planned flower bed. Interviews were few and far between, and when they happened, she kept the focus on her work, not her personal life. She didn't need the spotlight. Her gardens, her art, her jewels shone brightly enough. They weren't status symbols. They were extensions of her vision, ways of preserving and sharing the beauty she saw in the world. That same understated passion carried over into every corner of her life, especially when it came to giving back. For Bunny, beauty wasn't just something to admire. It was something to share, to nurture, to pass on. And she did that not by shouting her contributions from the rooftops, but by quietly weaving them into the fabric of the world around her. This brings us to Bunny and her husband Paul Mellon, this power couple who could have easily spent their days sipping champagne on private yachts or throwing lavish parties for the who's who of society. They had the money for it. Paul was the son of Andrew W. Mellon, a banking mogul who was basically the Warren Buffett of his day. But Bunny and Paul, they weren't about flashing their wealth. Nope, their thing was giving back. And they did it in a way that was so low-key, you'd hardly know they were behind some of the biggest donations of their time. They didn't need their names plastered on buildings or shouted from the rooftops. For them, philanthropy was about impact, not applause. It was about making sure the world had more beauty, more opportunity, more hope, and doing it without making a fuss. Now let's talk about their love for art, because, oh man, this was their passion with a capital P. Bunny and Paul didn't just collect paintings to hang in their mansions. They were on a mission to share the world's greatest masterpieces with everyone. Over the years, they donated hundreds of artworks to some of the most prestigious institutions out there. First up, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., which was practically a family project since Paul's dad, Andrew, helped get it off the ground back in the day. They gifted everything from Renaissance classics to Impressionist gems. Think Monet's water lilies or Van Gogh's swirling skies. These weren't just pretty pictures, they were pieces that could make you stop in your tracks and feel the weight of human creativity. But they didn't stop there. They also showered the Yale Center for British Art at Paul's alma mater with treasures, paintings by Turner, Constable, those British heavyweights who captured misty moors and stormy seas like nobody else. And then there's the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which got its own share of their collection, bringing world-class art to the heart of the South. Every piece they gave wasn't just a donation. It was a gift to the public, a way of saying, hey, you don't need to be a millionaire to stand in front of something breathtaking. Bunny and Paul believed art could lift people up, spark ideas, maybe even heal a little bit of the world's brokenness, and they made sure it was out there for anyone who wanted to see it. Now, if art was their soul, horses were their heartbeat. Bunny and Paul were crazy about thoroughbreds, and I mean crazy in the best way. They didn't just watch races from the stands. They were in the game, breeding champions at their Rokeby stables in Virginia. This wasn't a hobby. It was a way of life. They'd spend hours at the farm, watching foals take their first steps, picking out names, dreaming of the day those horses would thunder down the track. And let me tell you, their dreams paid off big time. In 1993, their horsey hero did the unthinkable. He won the Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl of horse racing. Picture Bunny and Paul in the stands, hearts pounding, cheering as Sea Hero crossed the finish line, mane flying, hooves kicking up dirt. It wasn't just a win, it was a moment of pure joy, proof that their love and hard work could create something unstoppable. That victory put Rokeby on the map, and Sea Hero became a legend, a symbol of everything Bunny and Paul poured into their passion. But their giving didn't stop with art and horses. In 2014, Bunny made a move that showed just how deep her commitment to family and legacy ran. She decided to auction off a huge chunk of her personal collection through Sotheby's, one of the fanciest auction houses in the world. We're talking jewelry that could blind you, furniture that belonged in palaces, paintings that could make an art historian cry. The sale was a blockbuster, pulling in nearly $159 million. That's not pocket change. That's a fortune. And what did Bunny do with it? She didn't buy a private island or a fleet of sports cars. She funneled every penny into the Gerard B. Lambert Foundation, a charity she set up to honor her father. This wasn't just about money. It was about keeping her dad's name alive, about making sure his values, hard work, generosity, a love for beauty, kept making a difference. The foundation supported all kinds of causes, from education to the arts, spreading Bunny's vision far and wide. It was her way of saying, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for. Now let's shift gears to the later years, because Bunny's story doesn't slow down, even as the decades pile up. The turn of the millennium hit her hard with personal losses that would have broken most people. First, in 1999, Paul passed away at 91. They'd been married for 51 years, building a life that was equal parts adventure and sanctuary. Losing him was like losing half her world. They'd shared everything. Late night talks about art, early mornings at the stables, quiet afternoons in their gardens. Paul wasn't just her husband. He was her partner, her confidant, her best friend. Bunny grieved deeply, but she didn't let it define her. She kept moving forward, honoring Paul by carrying on the work they'd started together. Then came another blow, one that hit even harder. In 2000, Bunny's daughter, Eliza Wynn Lloyd, was in a horrific car accident. Eliza, an artist with a spirit as vibrant as her paintings, suffered a traumatic brain injury and was left paralyzed. For 8 years, she fought with everything she had, and Bunny was right there, pouring her love and strength into her daughter's care. But in 2008, Eliza passed away, leaving Bunny to face a mother's worst nightmare. Losing a child is a pain that never goes away, and for Bunny, it was a wound that lingered in every quiet moment. Eliza's art, her creativity, her light, it was all part of Bunny's heart, and saying goodbye was devastating. But even in her grief, Bunny found ways to keep Eliza's memory alive, supporting the arts in her honor, making sure her daughter's passion for beauty lived on. As Bunny entered her 90s, her health started to show the wear and tear of a long life. She was diagnosed with cancer, a battle she faced with the same quiet determination that had carried her through everything else. She also developed macular degeneration, a condition that slowly stole her vision. For someone who'd spent her life surrounded by color, paintings, gardens, the sleek coats of her horses, this was a cruel twist. But Bunny didn't let it stop her. She adapted, leaning on her other senses, her memory, her love for the world she'd built. Up until 2011, she was still out in her gardens at Oak Spring Farms, her Virginia estate, tending to her roses and planning new layouts. When gardening became too tough, she switched to swimming and Pilates, keeping her body strong and her spirit sharper than ever. At 100, she was still moving, still engaged, still Bunny. But life wasn't all roses in those final years. Bunny got caught up in a couple of messy situations that showed even someone as savvy as her could get burned. Back in 2008, she threw her support behind John Edwards, a politician running for president. Bunny saw something in him, a charisma, a vision, that reminded her of JFK, one of her heroes. She poured over $3.5 million into his campaign, believing he could lead the country to a brighter future. But then the truth came out, and it was ugly. Edwards was caught in a scandal, using campaign funds to cover up an extramarital affair and a child born out of wedlock. Bunny was crushed. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust. She'd believed in Edwards, and he'd let her down in the worst way. You can imagine her sitting in her study, shaking her head, wondering how she'd misjudged so badly. It stung, but she didn't dwell. She picked herself up and kept going because that's what Bunny did. Then there was another betrayal, this one even more personal. Bunny had trusted a financial advisor named Kenneth I. Starr, not the lawyer, a different guy, who turned out to be a straight-up con artist. This sleazeball swindled her out of $5.75 million, money she'd worked hard to steward for her family and her causes. Starr was running a Ponzi scheme, fleecing rich clients left and right, and Bunny was one of his victims. When the scam came to light, she was furious, but also deeply disappointed. She'd always been careful, sharp, the kind of woman who read the fine print. Getting played like that hurt, not just her bank account, but her pride. Starr ended up in prison, but the damage was done. Bunny, though, didn't let it define her. She tightened her circle, focused on what mattered, and kept her eyes on the bigger picture. By 2014, Bunny was 103, living at Oak Spring Farms, the place that had been her haven for decades. This wasn't just a house. It was a world she'd created with gardens that bloomed like paradise, stables that echoed with the neighbors of champions, and rooms filled with art that told stories of centuries past. On March 17, 2014, she passed away quietly, surrounded by the beauty she'd spent her life cultivating. At 103, she'd lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, the tech boom, pretty much every major moment of the 20th century and beyond. Her death wasn't just the end of a life, it was the closing of a chapter in history. Her funeral was held at Trinity Episcopal Church in Upperville, Virginia, a place that meant the world to the Mellons. They donated the church themselves, a gift to the community they loved. The service was intimate, heartfelt, a celebration of a woman who'd touched so many lives. Friends, Family and admirers gathered to say goodbye, their voices mingling with the soft hum of hymns. Frank Langella, the actor, with a voice like velvet, stood up to speak, sharing stories of Bunny's warmth, her wit, her unshakable spirit. Her grandson, Stacey Lloyd IV, took the podium too, his words carrying the weight of a family's love and pride. And then, in a moment that brought everyone to tears, Bette Midler, yes, the Bette Midler, sang The Rose. If you know the song, you know it's about love, resilience, the courage to bloom even in the hardest times. It was perfect for Bunny, a woman who'd lived every word of that song. So, what's the takeaway from Bunny Mellon's life? She wasn't just a rich lady with a knack for pretty things. She was a force, a woman who took her privilege and used it to lift others up. She and Paul gave the world art that inspires, horses that thrill, gardens that soothe, and millions of dollars that change lives. She faced loss, her husband, her daughter, her trust in others, but she never let it dim her light. Even at 103, she was still dreaming, still giving, still loving the world with every fiber of her being. Her legacy? It's in the paintings at the National Gallery, the winners at Rokeby Stables, the kids who go to college because of her foundations. It's in the roses at Oak Spring, still blooming years after she's gone. It's in the story of a woman who lived through a century of change and made it better, one quiet, generous act at a time. Bunny Mellon didn't just live, she shaped. She took the raw materials of her life, love, loss, beauty, betrayal, and turned them into something extraordinary. And that, my friends, is a life worth celebrating. Here's to Bunny, a woman who proved that the greatest legacy isn't what you keep, but what you give away.